Stand on the edge of a map of Europe in the year 1810, and you would see nearly every border redrawn by the hand of a single man. In our previous episodes, we walked through the misty legends of King Arthur and explored how the human functions as a vault for our success. But today, we are looking at a man who was very much real, a man who rose from a backwater island to become the master of a continent. His name has become a synonym for ambition, genius, and the ultimate fall from grace. This is the story of Napoleon Bonaparte. To understand the man, we have to look past the stone monuments and the propaganda paintings. We have to look at the outsider. Napoleon was born on the island of Corsica, a place that had only recently become French. He grew up speaking Italian as his first language and was often mocked by his schoolmates in mainland France for his thick accent and his relatively humble background. This sense of being an outsider didn't break him. It fueled a burning desire to prove himself to a world that looked down on him. Interestingly, he was a math prodigy, finishing his military schooling in record time and becoming the first Corsican to graduate from the prestigious École Militaire in Paris. His rise to power is perhaps the most meteoric in human history. The French Revolution provided the chaos he needed to climb the ranks. At the Siege of Toulon, a young Captain Bonaparte used his brilliant grasp of artillery to drive out the British, earning him a promotion to brigadier general at just 24 years old. But Napoleon wasn't just a soldier. He was a master of image and narrative. He understood that to lead men, you must first capture their imagination. His soldiers nicknamed him the Little Corporal, not because of his height, but as a term of endearment, because he would often risk his life to aim the cannons alongside them, a job usually reserved for much lower ranks. One of the most enduring myths about Napoleon is his height. We often hear about the Napoleon Complex, the idea that he was a short man overcompensating with power. In reality, Napoleon was about 5 feet 6 inches tall, which was actually the average height for a Frenchman at the time. The confusion came from a difference between French and British measurements, and the fact that he was always surrounded by his imperial guard, who were required to be exceptionally tall. Even his famous pose, with his hand tucked into his waistcoat, was a deliberate choice of calm authority and high-class fashion of the era, rather than a way to hide a stomachache. Napoleon's military genius lay in his obsession with speed and logistics. He didn't just fight battles, he revolutionized how war was conducted. While other generals moved their massive armies like slow, heavy machines, Napoleon divided his forces into independent corps that could move fast and live off the land. He famously said that an army marches on its stomach, and he was the first leader to offer a massive prize for a way to preserve food for his troops, which led to the invention of canning. His campaign in Egypt is a perfect example of his multi-dimensional mind. He didn't just bring soldiers, he brought a literal army of scientists, linguists, and artists. They mapped the Nile, studied the flora and fauna, and most famously, discovered the Rosetta Stone. While a popular legend claims his soldiers shot the nose off the Great Sphinx, sketches from decades before his arrival prove the nose was already missing. Napoleon actually held a deep respect for Egyptian history, and his scholars published a massive multi-volume work that birthed the entire field of modern Egyptology. By 1804, Napoleon had moved from being a general to the first consul, and finally to the emperor of the French. During his coronation at Notre Dame, in a moment of sheer audacity, he took the crown from the hands of the Pope and placed it on his own head. This wasn't just arrogance. It was a clear political statement that his power came from his own hand and the will of the people, not from divine right or the church. To further distance himself from the old kings, he replaced the traditional lily symbol of France with the bee, a sign of industry and a connection to the very first kings of the Frankish Empire. Yet his greatest legacy isn't found on a battlefield, but in a book of laws. The Napoleonic Code replaced a chaotic mess of feudal laws with a clear, logical legal system that emphasized equality before the law and the protection of property. To this day, the legal systems of over 40 countries, including much of Europe and Latin America, are built on the foundation Napoleon laid. He once remarked that his true glory was not winning 40 battles, but that his civil code would live forever. But every empire has its breaking point. For Napoleon, that point was Russia. In 1812, he led the Grande Armée, the largest force Europe had ever seen, into the heart of the Russian winter. He expected a quick, decisive battle, but the Russians simply retreated, burning everything in their wake. Napoleon captured Moscow, but he found a ghost city on fire. The subsequent retreat was one of the greatest tragedies in military history. Of the 600,000 men who entered Russia, fewer than 100,000 returned. The end came in stages. First, a forced exile to the island of Elba, which he escaped in a daring return to France known as the 100 Days. Legend has it that he carried a vial of poison around his neck for years, and after his first downfall, he finally drank it. However, the poison was so old it had lost its potency, and he survived to fight one last time. His final defeat came at the Battle of Waterloo in 1815, where the combined forces of the British and Prussians finally broke his lines. He was exiled once more, this time to the remote volcanic rock of St. Helena in the middle of the Atlantic Ocean. There, in a damp house surrounded by guards, the man who had commanded millions spent his final years gardening and dictating his memoirs, carefully crafting how history would remember him. He died at the age of 51. For years, theories swirled that he had been poisoned with arsenic by the British, but modern research suggests he likely succumbed to stomach cancer, the same disease that took his father. Napoleon was a man of contradictions. He was a champion of the Enlightenment who became a dictator. He was a brilliant strategist who led hundreds of thousands to their deaths. He was a romantic who wrote passionate, almost desperate love letters to his wife Josephine, yet he viewed Europe like a giant chessboard. He once said that greatness is nothing unless it be lasting. Looking at the legal codes, the museums, and the very structure of modern Europe, it is clear that Napoleon achieved the lasting greatness he so desperately craved. Thank you for joining me for this look at one of history's most complex figures. If you enjoyed this journey from the shores of Corsica to the heights of the imperial throne, make sure to hit that like button. It helps our community grow and allows us to keep exploring the lives of the men and women who shaped our world. Who do you think Napoleon really was? Was he a visionary who brought progress to Europe? Or was he a tyrant driven only by his own ego? Let me know in the comments below. I would love to see your take on the Little Corporal. If you want to keep exploring the legends, history, and mysteries that shaped our world, make sure to subscribe and click the bell icon. To keep the History Marathon going right now, click on the video on your screen to dive into another incredible life story. Until next time, stay curious, keep learning, and move forward.